Hi, good morning and welcome to the Delta Stewardship Council. It's 9:30 a.m. on Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. We are here at the California Natural Resources Building in Sacramento, California. My name is Julie Lee and I am chair of the Delta Stewardship Council. Next, we're going to have Emma explain how the public can participate in this meeting. Emma?
If any member of the public is interested in providing public comment on any agenda item during today's meeting, please send an email to engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov as seen on the screen. Be sure to note a name and the agenda item that you wish to speak on. When called, the clerk will unmute you.
Thanks, Emma. And in accordance with our Bagley-Keene requirements, we'll conduct a roll call of our council members to establish a quorum. Emma, can you lead us in the roll call?
Yes, Chair Lee. I want to note that Councilmember Moranian is absent for this meeting. Councilmember Burgess.
Here.
Councilmember Weso. Councilmember Miller. Councilmember Zingali.
Here.
Councilmember Patterson.
Here.
Chair Lee.
Here. So we have a quorum. Our next agenda item is public comment. This item is for the public to comment on any topic that is not on the council's agenda. Any comments on items on the agenda need to be taken during that item. Emma, do we have any public comments for items not on today's agenda?
We have no public comment in Sacramento.
No comment here, Chair.
Thank you. All right, next we have the consent calendar. We have two items. The first one is the adoption of the December 18th, 2025 meeting summary. And the second is the approval of a contract amendment to contract number DSC 23011-A3 with the Regents of the University of California, San Diego, California Sea Grant for our science fellows. So before we move on to vote, I will ask if there's any public comment on these items.
There is no public comment in Sacramento, Madam Chair.
And none in Eureka.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion to approve these items.
I'll move the consent calendar.
All right, thank you.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. So we'll proceed with a roll call vote.
Councilmember Burgess.
Yes.
Burgess, aye. Councilmember Weso. Weso, aye. Councilmember Miller. Miller, aye. Councilmember Patterson.
Aye.
Patterson, aye. Councilmember Zingali.
Yes.
Zingali, aye. Chair Lee.
Aye.
Lee, aye. The motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we have the chair's report. I will make this short. I just wanted to congratulate Councilmember Burgess on being elected to lead the Board of Supervisors. So she's the new chair. So I wanted to give her a round of applause. I know she wears so many hats and still makes time for our council every single month. And I just wanted to bring that out. So thank you. Thank you for your service. All right. Do any other members have any updates or anything they'd like to add to the chair's report today? Nope. All right. Emma, is there any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment in Sacramento.
All right. Thank you. Next, we have the executive officer's report. So I will turn it over to Jessica Pearson.
Good morning. Thank you. I hope everyone's new year is off to a good start. I'm pleased to congratulate Rachel Wigington on her recent appointment by Governor Newsom as the new Special Assistant to Planning and Science here at the Delta Stewardship Council. She's going to serve as staff lead for the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee work and much more. Rachel's been a senior environmental scientist at the Delta Conservancy since 2020. Sorry, Campbell. She was coastal scientist at San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission from 2019 to 2020. She earned her doctorate in ecology from the University of California, Davis, a master's degree in biology from Cal State Long Beach, and a bachelor's in biology from Western Kentucky University. She's going to start her new role in early February. We're very excited for her to get to work on planning the next DPIC meeting. So you will get to meet her soon if you have not already. Under covered actions on December 18th, we had a certification filed by Reclamation District 1601 for the Twitchell Island Levee Improvement Project, San Joaquin River Reach. The project would construct levee improvements along the south side of Twitchell Island to increase the levee's resistance to erosion, to provide better overall levee stability, and provide enhanced rearing and out-migrating habitat for juvenile salmons. Improvements including nearly 4 miles of new foundation berm and setback levee, raising the height of an existing setback levee, a new sheet pile wall, a new dryland levee access or across Chevron Point, and new channel margin habitat. So the 30-day appeal window closed on January 20th with no appeals filed. And then, of course, as a reminder, we are in the middle of our statutory process of hearing appeals that were filed for the Department of Water Resources Delta Conveyance Project Certification of Consistency, 10 appeals in total. The hearing for these appeals has been set and will be held next month on Thursday and Friday, February 26th and 27th at the California Natural Resources Headquarters Building, 715 P Street in room 221, where we are meeting today, kind of our normal meeting room. And this will also serve as our February meeting as well. More details are available in the notice of hearing and the schedule of written submissions. Those are all posted on the Delta Conveyance Project website under the Covered Actions tab on the Council's website. This website also provides public access to certification of consistency and appeals documents, as well as a box link for the certification record. And as a reminder, we are under ex parte communication restriction regarding the project, meaning we cannot discuss the project with parties or interested members of the public outside of publicly noticed hearings. So for questions on anything that I just mentioned, the public can contact engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov. Nothing on comment letters for this month, but I do want to mention our December outreach highlights report, which is in your board packet. We're concluding another year of measuring our efforts on social media, website, email announcements, and webcasts. And a few noteworthy trends that we observed over the last year were that our follower growth on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook grew, but we did lose users on Twitter or X, which may be part of a broader trend of people using that website less. People-centric content really resonated most with our social media audiences. And our website continues to be primarily viewed on computers as opposed to mobile devices. So the full outreach highlights report and the active projects list, including all of the projects in the Delta we are tracking, are also available in your board packets. With that, I am going to invite up Audrey Cho for our legislative update. Welcome, Audrey.
Good morning, Chair and Council members, and happy back to legislative session to all who celebrate. If we could get my slides up, that would be great. Thank you for your patience. There we go. Awesome. Next slide, please. So let's begin with the state budget. On January 9th, Governor Newsom released his 2026 through 27 state budget. The budget totals $348.9 billion and addresses a $2.9 billion shortfall. The budget allocates $2.1 billion from the Proposition 4 climate bond across all investment categories. Most notably, the biggest allocation from the climate bond for this year is directed towards water projects, including $232 million for flood control projects and projects in the Delta, including repair and reconstruction of levees, weirs, bypasses, and other facilities. Outside of Proposition 4 for the Department of Water Resources, the budget also allocates $14 million for Delta levees program mitigation to address levee safety. And there's some increased spending in response to federal cuts, including $9.5 million for ongoing water supply forecasting, including river flow and snowmelt forecasting. Lastly, the budget allocates $8.2 million to the Department of Fish and Wildlife for their nutria eradication program, which addresses the spread of nutria to protect flood infrastructure and other critical habitat. I'll continue to provide updates that may be of interest as the budget process progresses. Next slide, please. On December 23rd, the new Senate President Pro Tem Monique Limon announced Senate leadership assignments. Notably, Senator Josh Becker of Menlo Park is the new chair of the Natural Resources and Water Committee. Senator Angelique Ashby of Sacramento is the new majority leader. Senator John Laird of Santa Cruz is the new Budget and Fiscal Review Committee chair. Senator Eloise Gomez Reyes is the new chair of the Subcommittee on Resources, Environmental Protection, and Energy for the budget. And then lastly, Senator Sabrina Cervantes is the chair of the Committee on Appropriations. Next slide, please. Now that we are in the second year of a 2-year legislative session, there are some bills I'd like to update you on. I mentioned the budget allocations for Proposition 4, the climate bond, which has some carve-outs for the Delta. Assembly Bill 35 by Assemblymember Alvarez would exempt the adoption of regulations needed to implement Prop 4 programming from the Administrative Procedures Act. Instead, granting agencies could receive approval for things like grant guidelines from the Secretary of the Natural Resources Agency following proper tribal consultation and public comment periods. This bill was indicated as an urgency statute. Next, we have Assembly Bill 1551 by Assemblymember Krell, which would declare that the California Rice Commission is necessary for maintaining a sufficient footprint of annual rice acreage to support wildlife habitat objectives of the state. And lastly, AB 1600 by Assemblymember Arambula would explicitly define disadvantaged farm worker communities within the definition of a disadvantaged community as defined by the California Environmental Protection Act agency. The bill would also direct the Environmental Protection Agency to update and revise applicable screening tools for program and benefit eligibility to ensure inclusion of this population. Next slide, please. And then lastly, in federal news, a 3-bill minibus of appropriations bills for federal agency partners was passed by the Senate on January 15th. The minibus was passed by the House on January 8th and is awaiting the president's signature. This minibus included allocations for agencies like the National Park Service, which funded the Delta National Heritage Area at an expected $500,000, which is great news. We also saw that the California Bay Delta Restoration Program was fully funded through the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation at an expected $32 million. Overall, these bills reject some of the massive cuts we saw proposed in the presidential budget request and make more restrained spending reductions. There are several other appropriations bills remaining in negotiations prior to the government funding deadline on January 30th, which is in 9 days. And with that, I conclude my report and welcome any questions you may have.
Yeah.
Thanks, Audrey. I've been kind of Googling and listening at the same time. You mentioned that there was 8.2 million for nutria eradication program. It made me start thinking about the golden mussel situation. And so in the governor's budget, did he allocate anything specifically, or is that coming from these other, like I see here, Proposition 4 bond funds gives 20 million in the budget, but so I was Googling while I was listening, but
Yeah.
Can you talk about how the state is addressing and backing that up with funding for the golden mussel?
Sure. So most recently, towards the end of the most recent legislative session, there was a public resources trailer bill, I believe it was AB 149, that allocated $20 million through the Proposition 4 climate bond for golden mussel response. And I believe that that funding is being allocated through the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so to my knowledge, the governor's budget that was released just a few weeks ago does not include specific allocations for the golden mussel, but they did call out the Nutria program.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Right. No other questions for Audrey? Anything else, Jessica, in your report?
I'll just wrap up briefly. Thank you so much, Audrey. So next we're going to hear from our Delta lead scientist, Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers, and then we're going to hear a presentation from council staff on our annual update on performance measures from the Delta Plan. And that's going to be followed by an update from Delta Watermaster Jay Ziegler. And so that wraps up my report unless there are any questions.
All right. No questions from the members, nothing from Daniel. Emma, do we have any public comment?
We have no public comment in Sacramento or online. Councilmember Zingali.
None here.
Right, thank you. The next agenda item is the lead scientist report. So we'll welcome Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham Myers.
Thank you, Chair Lee. Thank you, council members. I want to highlight that it's 2026 now, and we are still here, and I just do not take this for granted anymore. I'm calling this year the year of intentional connections with you, with the Delta community, and then also with the larger science community at large. Connections, particularly two-way connections, is the focus of today's presentations, and they are essential to realizing the potential of science to be used in decision-making. I'm going to discuss a recent conference that was attended by Dr. Maggie Chrisman. She's a program manager in the Delta Science Program, and me. That was where I called in from New Orleans in December. And then also, I'm going to update you on current activities going on in the YOLO bypass. So you're looking here at a video that Alan is going to cue up, and we'll turn off the harp music and we'll just talk to the slide. It's worth seeing. Anyway, you're looking at a video. It's about 3 weeks ago. The warm, wet December storms caused the Sacramento River to rise rapidly, and it caused the Fremont Weir to overflow. And that is a good thing because the Fremont Weir is a 2-mile-long wall that diverts the Sacramento River into the agricultural and natural YOLO bypass and away from Sacramento, and this building that we're in, it prevents it from flooding. The drone footage that DWR posted here is from New Year's Day. It shows the overtopping of the Fremont Weir and the first activation of what you're looking at, the big notch project gates. That's those 3 gates you're looking at there. Last year, DWR added these gates to the 100-year-old Fremont Weir, allowing for active management of water on the floodplain instead of just this passive wall that overtops when the river stage is at 32 feet. So this is an updated engineering of the weir, and it gives managers more choices. It improves flood control. It provides fish pathways for big fish like salmon and sturgeon, and it demonstrates the multiple benefits of floodplain connectivity to the Delta community. The YOLO bypass is about 10% the size of the entire Delta. This is a really large flooded area, like an inland lake. And you may have seen it from the airplane or when you drive over the YOLO bypass. And it's still draining right now out through the tow drain into the estuary. So next slide, please, Ellen. Thank you. Now that you've seen what the Fremont Weir looks like, we can go to the next or to the slides. Then I'm going to highlight a paper that basically goes into some of the main points here. So again, just to orient you, there's the Fremont Weir, there's the big notch, and there's the Sacramento River that's over top. So the paper, and next slide, please. Thank you, Ellen. This paper is on floodplain inundation and lateral connectivity, and particularly the way that they promote productivity in the managed river system of the YOLO bypass. The next slide, please. Thank you. So this paper was authored by Dr. Shruti Khanna from the Department of Water Resources and colleagues from other government agencies and academic institutions. It was published 8 weeks ago in a top journal called Ecological Applications, and the work was made possible by our science program's collaboration with NCEAS, the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis. Studies synthesized over 20 years of water temperature, chlorophyll A, which is how you measure algae in the water or phytoplankton, flow rates, and floodplain inundation data to analyze where, when, and how the YOLO bypass floodplain is supporting primary production and nutrient transport during high flows. These insights are critical to designing and managing water conveyance structures and flow regulations in the Delta. Next slide, please. All right, so they developed a model showing how re-wetting floodplains that have been disconnected from the river can help boost phytoplankton growth and ultimately inject more food into the river system. As you can see in this conceptual diagram, they use the data to put together 3 pieces of the puzzle. Shallow water is spreading out on the inundated floodplain in the first panel, and it's spreading out. There's more, the water temperature is rising, more sunlight's getting in, you have more phytoplankton growth. Then that phytoplankton is flushed downstream from the floodplain during periods of high flow, or once the flooding recedes, it just keeps flowing out. And then tidal mixing, once you get down to the confluence, is keeping phytoplankton in the delta instead of just letting it flush out to sea. And that's helping support aquatic food webs within the delta. The key takeaways of the paper is that restoring river floodplain connectivity boosts primary productivity and enhances downstream food webs. Scientists often liken our delta channels to food deserts. So improving connectivity in systems like ours is crucial for the delta ecosystem health. And proper design and operation of structures like Big Notch and Fremont Weir can aid this effort by being able to control nimbly when flooding is occurring and how much. And I think I want to highlight that 20 years of data collection has increased our understanding, and it's emphasized these benefits of lateral connectivity as floodplains become habitats and food sources for native species. This large-scale documentation that you're seeing here, you might have thought, oh, we know this, but it requires collaboration to actually quantitatively show it, and it generates confidence in understanding co-benefits of different management options. So we can expect to see more products like these synthesis products coming out of our NC's cohorts. We have one starting up this year with training starting March through June. And I'm happy to take any questions on this paper.
Because you put so much work into these reports, I really appreciate it. It's the Delta's so big, and there's so many, what do they call it, microclimates when we're talking about, the weather. There's micro ecosystems. And so to look at these in the big picture, to have all of this along the Delta in different places is important. And it's good for people to understand that. And it's interesting that we're able to kind of manage it a little bit too. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, then let's move to slide 5. This is where I want to highlight what our science program learned from engagement at the AGU fall meeting in New Orleans. It's a huge meeting. It's got over 25,000 scientists and probably the same number of takeaways, but I'm going to limit it to 3 takeaways here. The first is the importance of trust in these times. There was a panel on day 1 that had Marcia McNutt. She's a former director of USGS, and she's the current president of the National Academies of Science. She highlighted that all professions have taken a hit on trust right now, and politicians are actually far worse than scientists. But where we scientists fall short in the ranking is the question of whether scientists share or what citizens consider values. And it's hard to have support for people when they don't think, when they don't think that you're working on something that matters to them. So she highlighted the need to engage in two-way dialogue to show we are real people that care about the same problems that the citizens do and are working to address them. And also the need for science organizations like the National Academies to generate diverse policy options rather than consensus reports, and to develop them rapidly. It's the more diverse, the better, and the more timely. So not more of these 2-year consensus big products, because lots has changed in 2 years. But so National Academies is sort of changing their MO right now. Communication was key to all of her comments with policymakers and the public, and she also highlighted international connectivity. We need to bring people in to be effective translators of science for decision making. And that connection point that she brought up is just something that resonated with Maggie and I for the whole meeting. The second takeaway was lessons learned from a panel that we organized. The panelists were from collaboratories across the whole US. And so as we are starting one here, we wanted to learn things that have worked, challenges to be expected, and so on. Panelists were coming in from the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, Colorado River Basin, and then also from California. And while they were very different in structure and function, what they did have in common were some themes that the importance of communication, our shared vocabulary, sometimes the same word means different things to different people. The importance of clear objectives and setting boundaries to what you're going to work on, just because of mission creep is a real thing. And then overall, that trust and cooperation were just as important as the data and the models that were being used. And of course, we're starting this Delta modeling collaboratory, and we want to build that kind of trust and cooperation. All panelists said that the biggest cost was time, but groups like the Chesapeake Global Collaboratory, that's Victoria Coles there representing that, they highlighted that they created things called task teams so that they're ready to mobilize quickly when questions come up. So they can have rapid feedback of policy options for people to look at. And then when it came to defining success, the panel emphasized that the progress is often incremental, that there can be a real time lag between a collaboration and measurable impact, and that success metrics need to align with what people actually care about. But the most pressing concerns for communities are often not the same as traditional science questions, and collaboratories are one way to bring that together. There's not that many opportunities to get that kind of bidirectional feedback. And this is, all of these groups coming from very different places with very different management resource management issues. They all had the same basic story of the importance of bringing people in. And then the third takeaway was just that California, the Delta in particular, they were present everywhere. I counted 80 posters or presentations in the whole meeting that were directly relevant to our estuary or to California's water system. Partnerships between the USGS and UC researchers was particularly good for me to see, exploring water supply and water use implications. They were using cross-scale frameworks to understand drought responses, like this particular paper. This is our Delta Science Fellow, Abhinav Sharma. And he's one of the people that's taking implications from large-scale climate models and then mushing them with farmer decisions at the farm scale. So there's very complicated pieces going into understanding water demand. It's from the top and it's from the bottom, and it's daunting, but this is what scientists do, and that's why it's fun to go to meetings like this and see people pull these pieces together. And then finally, overall, AGU highlighted both from Maggie and me how science communication itself is evolving with new ways of reaching different audiences. So short form videos, podcasts, postcards, children's books. We saw a strong emphasis on science and art. The collaborations included things like composers working with climate scientists to translate data into music. So art and humor were other ways of communicating. And it was clear that you could just be more impactful if you brought people in and made science more accessible. And that's something we should not shy away from, this sort of basic human connectivity that we can all participate in. And then based on what we saw, we're interested in making space for this dialogue at the Bay Delta Science Conference that's being planned for this fall, further elevating science and art connections, and then also finding ways to intentionally inject Delta culture into this conference coming up in the fall. And Maggie's sitting right there and has so much more to add, but we wanted to just give you some of the key highlights. And then I think we can move to slide 6.
Did Maggie make that NASA quilt? Because I know she likes to make stuff like that.
Well, if you don't know Maggie's quilt making skills, they're like legend. And she just made one of the flooding of the flood history of the Yolo bypass. And it's actually with Henry right now because Henry's having a baby, which you know, just Henry and Anna. And so, yeah, the quilt is no longer here, but we have a photo somewhere that we can share because it's a good one.
And it's going to get put up in our lobby, right?
Oh, that's the one that Lisa Marie got.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the
was
party.
atmospheric rivers one. So
That's
the
right.
history of atmospheric rivers, Julie saw this.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's going up in the chair's office. But first I have to get it framed. That was part of the deal. So I'll get it framed. Okay. All right. So let me just close out then by briefly looking back at 2025 and highlighting some of the main themes that we shared on the days as part of the lead scientist report last year. So we tried to use this space to show you the value of new science findings, to bring you views into the future, and to highlight science advances for understanding not just our challenges, but our opportunities, especially with an eye to past, current, and future events and actions that we may need to consider or we may want to take. So one general theme was remote sensing, especially for water accounting and water quality. These issues are so important, and the hydrology has so many different drivers in different places in the Delta that remote sensing is going to be one of those ways to get a full picture of what's happening here, where and when. Satellites are letting us build more complete, detailed, and timely pictures of environmental conditions, which is especially powerful when you couple them with on-the-ground measurements. The Delta Watermaster is going to highlight OpenET, for example, and that's a good example of remote sensing being put to use for policy. Another theme has been stressors. New ones like the invasive golden mussel and contaminants like 6-PPDQ, that's the tire wear product that we're starting to find in our waters. Harmful algal blooms have been getting more frequent and more severe. And part of living with these stressors is having a framework to respond to them, like the resist, adapt, direct framework, that RAD framework that we talked about with invasive species earlier. Harmful algal bloom monitoring has momentum now, and the Independent Science Board has initiated a review on contaminants. The trick to responding through multiple stressors is understanding their risk and our response options, and I'm hoping that we explore more of that in 2026. A third theme is wetland restoration, acknowledging that we are occupying a former wetland right now, and the disconnection of land from water has degraded many ecosystem services like fish habitat and flood control. There are so many co-benefits to putting water back on land. We've only scratched the surface, talking about carbon flux restoration for greenhouse gas mitigation, food webs, subsidence reversal, and more. With big projects like Lookout Slough and Big Notch that you just saw on Fremont Weir, we're seeing potential benefits, and we'll keep our eyes on these nature-based solutions in the future too. And then finally, we have to highlight the importance of climate-related extreme events in the Delta. Was the focus of the State of the Bay Delta Science special issue that came out last year. And we also participated in the CNRA Secretary Speaker Series event on that topic. We have to acknowledge that these extreme events are complicating all of our co-equal goals. And so, you know, it's not going away. We're going to have to have a way to incorporate extreme events into our decision-making. And then, as we think about the future, and in particular 2026, we're going to keep bringing you interesting, relevant, and timely science in these lead scientist reports, keeping with the theme of intentional connections. We're going to keep being very intentional about our selection of highlights to keep you abreast of key scientific advances that are affecting the Delta, to draw attention to all the wonderful and important and innovative work that's actually happening here right now, and also to humanize that work by bringing people in so that you can meet some of the people that are doing the work. And then I can move to slide 7. Thank you. And in closing, just things to have on your radar. There are still 8 more days to submit comments to the draft Delta Science Plan. Again, that's our community-derived guidance of how we do science in the Delta. And so that's moving forward. It's been in review since November. And then also there's 2 big events coming up in March that for us, the Delta Science Program. One is this co-sponsored symposium on accounting for blue carbon in the Bay Delta, science, practice, and policy. And that is just going up on the web, like maybe yesterday or today. And it would be something that you have to register for, but it's an all-day in-person meeting. And we have a really deep bench of knowledge here in the Delta. So I expect to see a lot of people attending that meeting in March, on March 5th. And then the next one is the Interagency Ecological Program's annual workshop. The agenda is actually already posted. Registration opens on February 2nd. But one thing that they did call for was art. And it just ended the submission date, but maybe if you tapped them and had something to send, you'd still be able to get something into the queue there. So those are the 2 big events in March. And then, of course, we have the Bay Delta Science Conference in the fall. And when we know more about that, we'll share it. So thank you. Any questions on that?
Awesome. Yes, Anne.
This is not a question, it's a comment, which is just that in my brief time on this council, the most rewarding thing has been to see how much incredible scientific work and collaboration is happening, all the really talented scientists and the collaboration with scientists around the country and the state to try to really dig into some of the challenges facing the Delta and how we can best do our work. So it's just every time I look forward to these and just thank you all for the hard work, you and all the other folks who are working on the science side. It's just really impressive.
Yeah, I felt the same way when I first got on the council. I was like, wow, there's a lot of science going on here that I had no idea that was even as big a part of what we do here. I always find it interesting when we're out and meeting with people like new legislators or people out in the Delta. And I have a little bit to say about what the council does, but I always say more importantly, here's all the things that are happening in the science program, and it's always an epiphany to them too. So and I also wanted to say that some of the themes that you talk about that was at your recent conference were similar to the State of the Estuary conference that we had in October, especially the connection with community members and meeting them where they're at and using plain language and storytelling. That was really impactful to me. I took a lot away from that conference. So I know that we're talking a lot about our upcoming conference this fall, and I think we're going to probably be incorporating a lot of that in there. And there was a lot of art too, which was super interesting to me, how they're incorporating that as a way to tell the story to the public in a new way for them, other than data or reports or statistics. They can get that information through storytelling and art, and I thought that was really interesting. Yes, Diane.
Yeah, in a previous life, I was running Friends of Marsh Creek, a very small watershed group. And one of the things that we learned as far as the storytelling and engaging people was that we needed to meet them where they were. And so some folks were really interested in the critters, or others were interested in water quality or the impact on the Delta, or Delta-friendly gardening, or the impact that the trail along the creek had on the health of the community. So when we were able to tap into all those different interests and bring people together, it really did create this community of people that cared. And one of the things that I learned and experienced and observed was that when you can tap into those interests, whether it's the creativeness or the science or the socialization of getting together to do something together, you create people that learn, and then they want to share that information. And so then they teach it, and more people care and more people understand. And so by tapping into all of these different parts, whether it's the humor or the art or the science or the social reasons people get in, I think it's beautiful, and I appreciate it. Shifting gears, and hopefully maybe Jay will talk about this, we have observed a decline in the amount of monitoring that has been done, or in keeping it, and so can you tell me if we've seen an actual decline in the monitoring? Has the data declined? And is there any effort on people's part to make up for the things that we may be not seeing?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those comments, Diane. And I hope that you help us engage the community with that storytelling and such. Towards the monitoring, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stations offline right now, but that doesn't mean the data is not being collected. So what we're hearing, or I'm hearing, is that there is data collection. It's just not made available quite yet. So I think there's some conditions, things are going on that, we're not quite there yet, but I do think Jay Ziegler will address that in his presentation.
And this isn't, any kind of attack or criticism. I'm just raising awareness, because if we're not aware that there's some of these things happening and that we aren't getting that information in a timely way as we would expect, people need to understand that if we don't get it, then we have to react to it later than we would have been able to in the past. So I'm raising awareness, not putting out criticism.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Zingali also had his hand up.
Oh, thanks. I can't see him when we have a screen share. So yes, Daniel, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to add my appreciation to you and your colleagues for paying such thoughtful attention to these issues of public trust, shared values, communicating those values. It's really heartening to me to hear you're all taking that so seriously and working on it. I would imagine it would be tempting in times like these to kind of put your head down and just focus on your comfort zone of the science that you do so well. But I think all of us in an era when we need the public generally to trust in science, we need you to do exactly what it is you're pursuing, which is find ways, as I think Diane said so well, to tell the stories that relate to people's lives. So just kudos to you for that.
Thank you, Board Member Singh-Gully.
All right, so you have by the numbers for us?
I do. I feel like you're living it, so you might know some of these things already, but yeah, some things to note. This looks different. This is the first time we're reporting snow, and it's not really a great story. There at the climate symposium, they talked about low to no snow futures. It's kind of where we are right now. Things don't look so great in the snow department. There was a bunch of storms, but of course they were warm, and those have led to high flows. You're seeing that in the Sacramento River where, over 100% higher. It's 200% of the annual average for flows right now. So the Sacramento River is running high again, hence the flooding and the Yolo bypass. And all of the reservoirs are full, or not full to capacity, but they're above their average annual values. The rainfall continues to be high. So we still have high Northern Sierra and Central Sierra recordings. And so that nothing's really changed, except this is a warmer and a little bit drier January than has been seen in the past. So I think the snowpack is what we're going to keep our eye on the most, because this is not really a great way to come into winter. So I don't really have much more to say about by the numbers, because I think the numbers speak for themselves on this page, but happy to take any comments or questions.
Yes, Diane.
So it's interesting. The snow is not, it's underwhelming. But there was announcement that the drought was over or something like that. So you want to address that?
Just to say that, the reservoirs are full.
Right.
And we're at that high capacity right now for water deliveries, and you're seeing that on all the rivers. But that, yeah, it's a really great question. I don't have an answer as to whether the drought is,
Right.
truly over.
It really goes to
Traditional-
show how important the timing
Right.
is, right? I mean, full reservoirs in January are great, but you also want full reservoirs in August,
Right.
or the summer.
And traditionally, we had this natural storage, and that was in the snowpack. And so if we don't have a great snowpack, we have full reservoirs. It's great, but what does that say about, in the next couple months? So, yeah.
It gets back to the issue of messaging to the public and the stories that are told. I mean, I keep seeing those articles too. I have people send me those articles who know I work in water, and they're like, great news, the drought's over. I'm like, well, it's complicated. But yeah, so I think people see that and then they turn their attention away from conservation practices, et cetera. That's the risk. Whereas, then this summer, DWR could be in full-blown panic mode, talking about putting in a barrier or who knows, because the conditions can shift so quickly.
Good point.
I just want to also point out, but my question was about the dam levels. Oftentimes, how many dams, I've been watching this for years, and I've never seen a single dam be at 100% full, just simply because very few dams ever get to 100% full intentionally, because they release water so that they're a certain level. And I'm sure someone in an important position is deciding how much water to release or keep. It is interesting to see that the dams are full, but also hard to manage. If you were watching the news about Camp Kamchatka and 30 feet of snow in one event, I mean, that's kind of like the new normal where you don't know when, but we might get, a huge event, January, February, even as far as March, maybe even in April, who knows? And get an enormous amount of snowfall or not, or just see the regular, we may see the beginnings of another drought coming up, who knows? But I've lived through a lot of droughts and they're extremely harmful. I remember going to some of the lakes, seeing Folsom Lake completely empty, where they can't even release water anymore. And it was a shocking image to see that lake completely drained. And it got to the point where they couldn't even take water anymore, and it was being lost by evaporation. And that was as early as going out there in September and seeing the whole thing empty was just shocking. But I hope that doesn't happen again. And I'm always worried that it happens. But also, we've never seen these really extreme events that we're seeing now. I think that's something that we have to adjust to, and it's going to be hard because the patterns are becoming less and less discernible. And so we'll see what happens this year, but let's pray for the best.
Yeah, I think we've been hearing a lot about the change in reservoir operations from averages to forecast-informed reservoir operations, what they call FIRO. We learned about it when we went on our tour at DWR's Flood Operations Center, and then I think we've had some people come in and talk to us about it. But it's the dance, right, between having enough capacity left in a reservoir for a huge rainstorm to mitigate the chance that there's going to be flooding in our urban areas. So we need some amount of storage available, and having that storage in there for later in the year when we need water all over the state. So yeah, I guess that's why hydro operators are so important. My husband's a hydro operator.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's an interesting point that Ben put up about never seeing the reservoirs full. I remember one day, one lead scientist report, maybe 2 years ago, the Orville was really full.
Well, whenever the year the dam broke, it was full.
Yes.
That's the
Okay,
whole
that's it.
reason
Okay.
that the dam broke.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I want to give DWR credit. They are full on forecast informed reservoir operations right now. And it's, I think you can see it also in the data. So, yeah, best of luck to them. And the dance analogy was, of course, that's something that was brought up by Sasha Gershinoff in his papers, that we have to learn to be able to dance with these storms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Important.
Yep. And having those people working at NOAA and that have always, we've relied on for that storm information is critically important. And we're having a lot of cuts in that area, which does not help our forecast informed reservoir operations at all. So it doesn't seem like everyone's on the same page there. All right. Do we have any other member questions for Dr. Lisa Marie? Nope. All right. Daniel, I can't see you, but I'm assuming you're good. If not, we'll turn to public comment.
We have, excuse me, we have no public comment online or in Sacramento.
No public comment in Eureka.
Thank you. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Pearson to introduce our next agenda item, the 2025 Performance Measures Year in Review.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we're ready to talk performance measures. Some of the really important questions that we often reflect on here at the council are, how is the Delta doing? And how do we know if the Delta plan is having an impact? As you know, the Reform Act requires the Delta plan to have measurable targets to achieve its goals. So to do this, we have a set of performance measures that we use to monitor changes in the environment that are tied to our regulatory policies and our recommendations. That connection is sometimes very direct feedback and other times perhaps less direct, but everything that we track helps us understand how we are doing and what we need to do to change to do better, and what we need to change to do better. The council's performance management unit continuously tracks these performance measures. They evaluate the data, they summarize key findings each year to provide an annual pulse check of the Delta's evolving conditions. So that's what you have here today. When we do our 5-year review of the Delta plan, we're able to rely on performance measures to examine these directional trends, and that informs our future work. So performance measures are updated based on availability and frequency of data. Some can be assessed every single year. Others are going to depend on specific conditions like a water year type or an emergency event. The 2013 Delta Plan first set these measures, and the council has revised them twice as part of our amendments. So this process allows us to directly integrate scientific monitoring into our decision-making. It helps us adaptively manage the Delta Plan and our funding priorities, and just helps keep us on track towards the co-equal goals. So now I'm going to hand it over to Program Manager Martina Kohler and our performance measures team to provide the 2025 annual update. Welcome.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Good morning, council members. So last time we reported to you was in February last year. So I'm happy to be back with some fresh updates. Okay. A quick refresher about why we have performance measures and what they are. I mean, Jessica already covered most of it, but it all started with the Delta Reform Act, requiring that the Delta Plan includes quantified and measurable targets associated with achieving the objectives of the Delta Plan. So to fulfill this requirement, the Delta Plan includes performance measures that track all these environmental and administrative conditions that are taking place due to policies and recommendations in the Delta Plan, and specifically in relation to time-specific and measurable performance targets. So the performance measures consist of science-based metrics, baselines, and targets that align with one or more Delta Plan policies and recommendations. So listed here on the slide are the topics we will be covering today. We are featuring these specific performance measures because they track significant recent updates and because of their importance to Delta management issues. The focus on ecosystem aspects is intentional, and I'm joined with Hannah and Scott from the Performance Management Unit to walk you through these annual updates and the implications. Maybe quickly about the kind of the conditions over the year, because climate and precipitation patterns, as mentioned today, drive environmental conditions and therefore they impact the management outcomes. So the year 2025 was kind of average year in terms of the precipitation. One interesting thing is the bigger than usual difference between Northern and Southern California in terms of precipitation. The map kind of shows this difference in terms of percentage of from average precipitation. So the green and blue is like higher than average, and the orange and red is below the average. But it was kind of interesting in that year. So now moving to ecosystem. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So the Delta Plan sets a vision for restoring a healthy Delta ecosystem and establishes a target for restoring additional 60 to 80,000 acres of functional, diverse, and interconnected habitat by 2050. So this is kind of in addition to existing about 70,000 acres of existing natural habitat. So together, if the targets are met, the nature habitat would cover about 15 to 18% of the overall Delta and Suisun Marsh area. And additionally, the Delta Plan also says that the restoration projects should be compatible with adjacent land uses and support the human values of the Delta. So good news, the pace of ecosystem restoration has increased in recent years. About 15,000 acres of projects have been completed mostly in the last 5 to 6 years. Tidal wetlands located in the northern and central parts of the Delta and Suisun Marsh are the main habitat types being restored. And additionally, there is about 16,000 acres or so under construction or in planning phases. So in total, these existing or completed projects and future restoration projects would be about over 30,000 acres. So this is kind of gives us a good head start toward the targets the target. I guess one important things to highlight is that the implementation of restoration projects from planning to design to underground work is taking time. It's kind of slow depending on the project, but sometimes it may take many years, sometimes even a decade. So it's kind of one thing to keep in mind as we see these acreages. One interesting project that has been kind of completed and became operational, and somebody has mentioned it this morning, with the drone video, is the Big Notch project. It's part of the Fremont Weir. It became operational after, many years of planning and preparation. Became operational in the fall of this year, and we saw the footage like overflowing. But the Big Notch project is important in a way because it gives us more operational flexibility as far as allowing, maybe even if the Sacramento River is flows lower, allowing that water to still flood the yellow bypass, which is kind of important because we have a performance measures that kind of specifies or sets targets for how often, how long, and the timing, what we want to see as far as flooding the yellow bypass floodplain. So the Big Notch project becoming operational will help meet these performance targets. So this was exciting. When we speak about restoration, it's not only about the quantity, but the quality is important too. So the Delta Plan promotes ecosystem-based restoration. It defines the desired design attributes of restoration projects in order to increase the effectiveness of individual actions and kind of contribute to overall ecosystem health and resilience. So a project ideally should have these 5 attributes listed, should be large scale, should improve connectivity, restore ecosystem functions, support native vegetation, and contribute to species recovery. So a project with all these desired attributes, we call them like tier 1 project. And if it has only 4 of these attributes, we call them tier 2 projects. So we have a performance measure that tracks ecosystem projects based on these desired attributes. And the target is to increase funding for projects in tier 1 and tier 2 categories. And the goal is to be at least 80% of overall ecosystem investments goes to these tier 1, tier 2 projects. So far, we started the tracking in April this year. So we have only 3 projects that are tier 1 or tier 2. And again, the goal is to increase more funding to these desired projects to improve effectiveness overall and kind of increase the benefits, like not to do isolated projects with single focus, but rather have these cumulative benefits. The Delta serves as a migration corridor for the Central Valley salmon runs, and the Delta Plan sets a goal of doubling the natural producing salmon population as a measure of healthy Delta ecosystem. So naturally producing populations, it's like born and raised without human help. So after 2 years of wet conditions, the salmon population is showing some small positive increases. However, these increases are isolated to few tributaries, such as in Sacramento River, it's the Feather and American rivers, and then in San Joaquin River watershed, it's the Mokelumne, Stanislaus, and Tuolumne rivers. However, in other tributaries, salmon continue to decline, and the listed species, such as the Sacramento River winter run and spring run, are approaching like extremely low numbers. So overall, the population numbers are below the baseline levels. Okay, so staying in the ecosystem category, but moving on to native species, I will pass the mic to Scott.
Good morning, council members. My name is Scott Navarro, environmental scientist. And as Martina mentioned, I'll be briefing us with the non-native invasive species performance measure. Next slide, please. So real quick, invasive species are plants or animals that are not native to an ecosystem. And once introduced and established, they're produced quickly and spread, causing harm to that environment and further impacts to infrastructure, the economy, or even human health. Now, this specific performance measure is actually very large, but we'll be focusing on the non-native invasive species introductions. And there are 3 species I'd like to highlight. Next slide, please. The first one is Nutria, familiar face. Nutria is a highly invasive non-native semi-aquatic mammal and has impacts to the native delta habitat, can damage agricultural crops and levees in the delta. First found in the valley in 2017, they continue to proliferate within the delta despite eradication efforts by the state. The latest numbers in 2025, there were about 2,000 individual nutrias that were taken throughout California, with over 1,000 of those being from the legal delta and Suisun Marsh. As you can see in the slide on the map there, they're mostly found in Suisun Marsh and the Western Delta. Unfortunately, on November 2025, Nutria scat was found in Lookout Slough, which is one of the largest, newer restored areas in the Delta, and that's like in the northwest part of the Delta. So they may be present there already. Next slide, please. Moving on, is a newer invasive species, golden mussel. We've been talking about it earlier. They were first sighted in the fall of 2024 in the Delta near Stockton. However, it has further spread throughout the central and southern Delta and further south following the State Water and Central Valley projects all the way south to Riverside County. This is the first known occurrence in North America, and it's extremely significant. They can cause threats to the ecosystem, water quality, as well as economic impacts such as repairs and maintenance to water infrastructure. And they're already impacting water operations on the State Water Project. Now, I wanted to highlight what the state has done in 2025 to address the threat of golden mussels. First, they adopted an emergency regulation in late 2024, the Fish and Game Code, to add the golden mussels to the restricted species list. That has been now permanently adopted by the Fish and Game Commission and has been in effect since the start of the new year. The state also published a golden mussel response framework in the spring of 2025. This provides recommendations to state and local policymakers on how to respond to the detections of golden mussels. There are several prevention and mitigation strategies that the state is pursuing, such as the clean, drain, and dry initiatives, as well as checkpoints at water bodies so that they can prevent the spread between those water bodies. There's a lot of ongoing research on how to treat water infested with the mussels. And lastly, the passage of AB 149, which Audrey talked about earlier. They made several changes to the fish and game, vehicle, and harbor navigation codes to include the golden mussels. This also appropriated $20 million in Prop 4 funding to Department of Fish and Wildlife to address the golden mussels. Next slide, please. And lastly, we have the mute swans. Now, mute swans are actually not new to the estuary and have been in Suisun Marsh since 2007 and has been in the US since the 1800s. However, according to the most recent population survey, the population have actually increased drastically each year since its discovery. And I wanted to make a quick clarification. In the staff report, it says 6,900 there. That's actually the 2024 number. And the 2025 number is the 12,000 up on the screen. Mute swans are voracious feeders of aquatic vegetation, and this can negatively impact the structure and function of delta habitats. Additionally, they are very aggressive and territorial, and they can disrupt other birds' nesting activities, especially for native waterfowl, and have been reported to physically injure or even kill other birds. They've also been reported to attack people and have injured pets. So in 2025, new legislation was passed that allowed the take of mute swans starting in 2026 to control the numbers. There are already reports to CDFW that reports of take are ongoing with mute swans. So there's people that are actually actively hunting them now. And with that, I'll be passing it on to Hannah.
All right, thank you, Scott, and good morning, council members. My name is Hannah Cheney. I'm an environmental scientist with the Performance Measures Unit, and today I'll be talking about the National Flood Insurance Program and the CRS program that we track. So this can be kind of a complex topic, so I like to start with a little bit of a refresher. and context as to why it's relevant to our agency. The National Flood Insurance Program provides insurance to help reduce the socioeconomic impact of floods that is run by FEMA and the federal government. Communities that go and above and beyond basic flood requirements as required through NFIP are eligible to receive a discount for their residents on NFIP premiums through the Community Rating System, or CRS. Activities that count for points towards this program are things like developing new maps, data, preserving open space in floodplain areas, and improving public response and awareness of flood threats. The Delta Plan recommends increasing Delta community participation in this NFIP Community Rating System program to promote flood insurance availability and limit state liability in the event of a flood. So the map to the right there kind of shows why this is so relevant to the Delta. It identifies the special flood hazard areas within the legal Delta as identified by FEMA. These zones represent areas with 1% annual chance of flooding and constitute about 77% of the legal Delta, so pretty significant area. Property owners that live in a special flood hazard zone and also use a government-backed mortgage to purchase their home are required to have flood insurance by law. I also want to point out that this topic connects to many other council initiatives like Delta Adapts, and in the Delta Residents Survey, when questioned, it was found that 1/3 of rural Delta residents and 1/5 of Delta city dwellers reported having access to flood insurance. So on to what we actually are tracking. We're tracking the community rating system points. So again, these track the level of investment a community has made beyond minimum NFIP flood planning requirements, and the number of CRS points correlates to the discounts a community's residents receive to be eligible for the program. So the higher the CRS score is, the more discount a community can receive. So what did we actually find? Our target was a 1% increase in the community rating system credit points by 2025 from 2013. And we found that the credit points in the Delta communities have actually decreased by 15% since 2013. So on to the next slide to see why kind of that happened. So yeah, just directing your attention to the bar graph over there. This is how the data appears on our website. And accounting for that 15% decrease, we found that there were a couple of smaller Delta communities that did not earn enough points to keep up with the program. So that would be Lathrop and Manteca. You can see that their blue bar, they had probably about 10% of a discount in 2013, but then, 2025, they're no longer participating. You can also see that Fairfield and San Joaquin County took decent decreases in this program. But I also want to point out that most counties and communities did stay consistent. And you can see that Sacramento and Sacramento County have actually invested in the program. Their orange bars have gone up since 2013, so that's great to see. I also wanted to tie this a little bit into the discount rates that Delta residents are receiving. So for every 500 of those CRS points, that translates to about a 5% discount for a community. So that map shows the 2025 discount levels per community. The hatch lines represent city boundaries, and then the counties are underneath that. As you can see, much of the Delta has about a 10% discount rate, but do want to highlight again, Sacramento County, represented by that dark green there, does have a 35% discount for reference. And just to put in perspective the price point there, the NFIP average annual rate for a single family home premium in California was around $900 in 2023. Yeah, so the last thing I want to touch on is just one factor that might be influencing some of the data that we're seeing, and that is that NFIP currently does not have long-term statutory authorization. So that means that Congress must periodically renew, extend statutory authority for this program and funding, which it has done 33 times since the end of 2017, the last time being the 43 day-long shutdown, which I think we all are quite familiar with and remember. During this time, policyholders are still covered if there is a disaster, but NFIP is unable to issue new policies or renew policies or really make any changes. And this can serve as a potential barrier to home sales and closings in flood-prone areas like the Delta. Congress will have to reauthorize this program by January 31st to avoid yet another lapse later this year. But yeah, if you have any questions, happy to answer later. Thanks.
Any questions? Yes, Diane.
I'm just curious, we were looking at, we've been looking at the FAIR plan for fire. And so I'm wondering, and what I understand is that is a program that is actually funded and run by insurance companies. Who runs this?
So for NFIP, that's like
Yeah.
federal, that's like through FEMA specifically. So
Through FEMA?
Yeah, through FEMA.
Okay.
Mhm.
And has there been any indications, because FEMA has been under a lot of, I'm trying to say it diplomatically. It's questionable what type. Thank you. And so, is that part of that whole package that's being reimagined, or is this an area that seems to be kind of stable at this point? I know I'm asking you to look at the crystal ball and tell me the future, but
Yeah.
just, it's not something that I look at, as closely as you do.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate you doing this. But what is the situation, or that we know?
Yeah, so I think that is like the question that everybody really wants to know. And unfortunately, I think the narrative in like communities is like, hey, we've heard things about FEMA. There's really been no official statement on it. I shared the part about like the 33 times that it's lapsed,
Right.
just to show like, hey, this is a concrete number that like shows that like it may not be perceived as reliable, that we're still like, yeah, nobody has a crystal ball, unfortunately, and there hasn't been any like official, guidance made, but that is kind of the narrative going
And
on.
California is not unique to flooding. There's a lot of places across the country that have actually more flooding issues. And so it's not like it could be directed at a California issue. Martina, you look like you really want to say something.
On the topic.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Not specifically
you.
to the topic. We have some concluding slides, so now I'm just watching. Sorry.
Anne, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I had a comment and a question. I think because you have flooding across the country, and it becomes a bipartisan issue often, which is why it's reauthorized, and it's very hard to target a particular state. There are ways that FEMA can target in terms of like reimbursement rates, which can depend on the state, but the actual program seems to like keep getting bipartisan support because it is all over the country. The other question I had is, you said the average rate is 900. Was that per year? That's the policy.
Yeah, so that was
Okay.
annually. So
Okay, got it.
that's for a single family home as of 2023. So a couple
Got
years
it.
later.
But still like a 30% discount is a meaningful
Yeah.
change for them. And when you, with a CRS, those scores to get a higher score, is that infrastructure change? Or like you had mentioned increases to or improvements to the maps, but I was wondering what types
Yeah.
of things does a community need to do? And is it community level versus obviously in the fire, it's often individual property level mitigations that are needed?
Yeah, so these are community level changes and some are infrastructure based. So like managing open space and like floodplain, like having those areas for it to flood. But within that too, there's also like mapping and the data aspect of it as well. And kind of the public awareness of it. So it's multifaceted
Got it.
in that way.
And you had also mentioned the 1/3, 1/5 for the rural and the community. So I assume those are people, since they are required to have a mortgage to have flood insurance, that this is people who don't, are like just on, how do you sort of reconcile the mandate with the fact that you have 1/3 of people potentially without flood insurance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think for that, so the government-backed mortgage is a big piece of that. So like not everyone does. I know there was a really good memo like that I used to that Audrey produced on this that really breaks down like other factors too that could. So take a look there, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. But I was surprised to see that kind of disparity too. So yeah.
All right, Martina?
Yeah, we have some more slides. Just gonna conclude some concluding remarks. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Hannah. So to summarize, kind of overall presentation today. So first, we have seen a good progress in terms of ecosystem restoration projects, and the extent of completed acreages is increasing, and additional projects are in various stages of implementation. So that's good news. However, restoring ecosystem functions and processes is a slow process, and so far responses by native species are not at scale and pace needed. We talk about salmon populations, seeing some positive increases, but these are limited to only few streams, and as I said, way below the baselines. Non-native species are impacting existing ecosystem as well as the restoring areas. So we are seeing new invasive species coming to the delta and expanding populations. And once established, these species are very difficult to control. As for the human dimensions, we talk about the delta residents live in the flood-prone areas, and their participation in the National Flood Insurance Program is lower than 10 years ago. So this is increasing the cost of flood insurance and potentially limiting some of the economic development from the housing market. And lastly, we did not speak much today about the water supply reliability. This is because statewide we have seen great progress in meeting water conservation targets, especially in cities and urban areas. We reported on this last year. Updated data are anticipated to be available later in the year, and so we will bring them to you. So what are the key takeaways? So one thing, annual reporting of performance measures provides a regular structured feedback across key aspects of delta management. The performance measures selected today observed recent changes are relevant to management actions. The focus on ecosystem performance measures was intentional because there is a momentum, but there is also a need to continue improving some areas and meeting the challenges. Restoration funding should be increasingly focused on large-scale projects that restore nature processes, improve ecosystem functions such as food webs, and reconnect land with water. Non-native invasive species continue to be an issue. While agencies are doing a good job in responding, the efforts need to continue on all fronts, from the vigorous prevention to rapid response to new occurrences to funded and coordinated control. One of the effective ways to manage water supply reliability is to continue control demand for water. Efforts in improving water conservation and reducing per capita water use need to continue as a key part of the water reliability strategy. And last but not least is the focus on the people in the Delta. We need to increase investments and coordination in risk reduction and improving the quality of life and well-being of Delta communities. And just in closing, what's ahead of us for our work? So we will continue, we are planning to communicate and these findings and engaging with our partners to inform actionable priorities. We are planning to feature progress and accomplishments by the individual agencies that implement the Delta plan on the performance measures dashboard. I guess I didn't mention it, but everything that we are presenting today and more across all these performance measures, the full portfolio is available on the performance measures dashboard. We have plans to expand the dashboard with new tools to deliver useful and usable data and also provide effective and transparent information that hopefully builds trust, as Lisa Marie was talking about this morning, as we serve our broad and diverse audiences. And lastly, as the new data and science is becoming available, we are improving the performance measures in terms of additional metrics and methods. And we will be reporting back to you on these enhancements to performance measures. So that is the last. So now we can have even more discussion if there are any questions. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Martina. I hope that when we make some of our anticipated changes to the performance dashboard, that we can invite you guys back to kind of show us and show the public how to use that dashboard and some of our new tools and things that we're expecting to roll out. So we look forward to that.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I think the dashboard has changed and evolved since we, I think, initially presented it some time ago, a few years ago. So I think it would be a great opportunity to yeah, show that and walk users through that.
That'd be great. I remember one time Judge Damrell making a comment during a meeting, asking, how do we know if we're making progress on our initiatives here at the Delta Council? And I think this performance dashboard is one way that people don't have to wait for our meeting to look at that. They can take a look at how advancements are being made on our Delta plan anytime they want. It's publicly available. So that's, I think, a big improvement. Thank you. Yes, Diane.
So when I was looking at this, one of the first things I thought about is when I started doing a lot of water stuff, I realized that we don't know what we don't know. And I think about wastewater treatment. For the longest time, they didn't test for certain things because they didn't it didn't occur to them that it was there, like pharmaceuticals or, the presence of other things. So that's kind of what I think about with this. It's like, are we open to knowing that we don't know everything and being able to add those things as we move along? I think that's important. You talked about restoration, and I thought about the fact that, we're learning as we go, and each restoration project is unique and different and has different circumstances. And so to put pressure on the timeline is disingenuous if we truly want to do this type of restoration work. And even the word restoration can have some assumptions that we're restoring it to a certain time or whatever, but actually we're adapting to make it perform in today's place and to restore it as in how it can help. And so I just think it's really, important for people to understand that restoration is not like a cookbook where you have a recipe and it, comes out exactly how you want it. You learn as you go, and sometimes it works better than you expected, and sometimes there's circumstances that you didn't know that you have to incorporate into your thing. So I found the salmon doubling goal interesting because it said without human help. And that's fascinating to me, because how do you measure that, right? Because we're trying to help. And there's all these other things going on. I was thinking of hatcheries and how that, are we learning that has negative impacts versus positive and all of that. So I just thought that was an interesting point. And Scott, I didn't know about mute swans. I'm 5 foot tall, and they say your arm span is your height, so that's 5 feet. So down to Julie, 8 feet wingspan of these beasts. And when I was driving down here, I saw a bunch of big white birds out there, and I'm thinking, oh, so I learned something new today, and I'm interested. Is that is that coming at like duck hunting facilities, or how is that take happening?
I'm not sure where the take is happening, but it is recommended to, it's not required, but it is recommended to report it to CDFW. And I was just told that they're starting to hear that there is, I'm assuming that it is from like clubs, just because there actually a lot of them are in Sassoon Marsh.
Yeah.
So that could be where it's happening.
Yeah.
Where the take is being reported.
Well, thank you for bringing something new for me to worry about.
Yeah, sorry. I'm also 5 feet. So
Oh, really? Tall people club. No, I just was like, what the heck is this? So thank you very much. And thank you for this report. I think as humans that are interested in actually making a difference, not only going out and doing the work, but showing what we're doing and allowing there to be some success and some not so success. I think that is a genuine effort that people can understand, and I appreciate the report out.
Do they taste like chicken?
we can ask the people reporting it. So, I mean, yeah, taking them.
I like the garlic vessel. Well, thank you guys very much. No other questions from our members. So we'll go to ask if there's any public comment.
We have no public comment online or in Sacramento. Councilmember Zingali?
None in Eureka, thank you.
No public comment.
Thank you. So next we'll welcome up our Delta Watermaster, Jay Ziegler.
Okay. I'm pretty loud, so it'll be, all right. Chair Lee, council members, good morning. Welcome, Councilmember Patterson. Nice to see you here today. I am delighted to be with you this morning. I'm going to cover a fair body of work that our teams, my team is particularly working on in bringing Delta water rights holders into the new Cal Waters database. And so in particular, we've talked about this virtually every appearance before the council. I really want to acknowledge that the pioneering work of Michael George, my predecessor, and the Delta Water agencies working together to achieve a 99% reporting rate on the Delta Alternative Compliance platform that utilized the OpenET database to report water use in the Delta. And so that standard is unprecedented at the state board, and really set a high mark. And so as we transition to a new integrated statewide Cal Waters database, we've been learning lots of lessons as we try to import both the functionality of the OpenET reporting system, as well as just making transitioning literally every water rights holder across the legal delta into a new system. And so we've been kind of involved in a very high touch operation with more than 1,100 water rights holders across the legal delta, and generally feeling pretty good about where we are today. We've got we're at a point where 1,000 of the 3,000 water rights across the legal delta are now enrolled in the system. And we're at a point where less than 10% of water rights holders are not yet active. So we're moving forward. The deadline for reporting is January 31. There's a 30-day grace period, but additionally, at the end of that period, non-reporters are subject to penalties. And those penalties are non-negotiable, something that all of us would recognize as being late on your taxes, and then you are, unless you can prove exigent circumstances, you're going to be subject to a penalty. So what have we learned? The user case is different. The importation of the data from one platform to another has been generally successful, though we're finding some of the data did not move over. So there are glitches in the system that we work with individual users to identify and fix. We have a robust case tracking system, so we've got everybody really carefully monitored in the system, and we're really focused on really trying to replicate the performance objectives that we achieved in the alternative compliance plan the last couple of years. Let's see here. I clicked through one. And I also want to underscore that the reporting process is really driven by Senate Bill 88, passed by the legislature in 2015. And the mandate of that bill is also that all major diverters in the Delta, so those diverting at a rate of greater than 30 cubic feet per second, or using more than 10,000 acre feet of water on an annual computation basis, have to provide some sort of a metered measurement. And we're working with large diverters across the Delta to really analyze what kind of metering provides us the best data to discern actual consumptive use and closer to real time. And finally, all of this is really built upon the architecture of the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium, which includes Delta farmers, water rights attorneys, a wide group of engineers, and academia across the spectrum in California and nationally to really develop the best data standard that we can in implementing a reporting platform. And we are working together with a number of parties, including Metropolitan Water District very actively at Bolden Island, using multiple devices for measurement. So Metropolitan is providing metering data from their 50 siphons or 55 siphons at Bolden Island. And we are also using an ecovariant station, so ground-based sensor data and various satellite data to kind of look at an intersection of what data is telling us and how we are correlating data to understand both general and real-time consumptive use and diversion of water in the Delta. The Nature Conservancy is a different example. They have 55 gauges, but are not able to afford metering at those diversion gauges, and really in the same position as most Delta farmers that are, by comparison, smaller scale farmers than the rest of the state. And so they are more cost sensitive. And so we're looking at a system there in which we use both satellite data as well as the return pumping data. That is because the Delta is so highly subsided, just about all farmers are doing return pumping back into the Delta. And so we're measuring from a water budget perspective, what is the rate of that return pumping? And is there an ability, for example, to calibrate the electricity use on those return pumps to help farmers better meter their actual water use and develop better closed Delta water budgets in terms of actual water use and consumptive use? So there's a lot of methods there, and I think what's really exciting as you begin to pull the data together, and this is something of a game changer, as my colleagues have noted, is that we are using multiple methods to really track and assimilate overall Delta water use. And what you have here is an ensemble of the overall water uses from agriculture to urban, riparian, and native vegetation, and thinking about water use and from a consumptive use perspective in the Delta. And so we've generally had a pretty good sense that agriculture is 2/3 of the water use in the Delta, and that's affirmatively supported here. But you'll see a variance as we enter drought years of 10 or 15% in any direction. And so by being able to have this kind of multi-dashboard toolkit to analyze consumptive use, we're able to refine these numbers and better understand actual Delta water budget dynamics. And this becomes really important, and especially I'm glad to be on the heels of the reporting on the progress metrics and the Delta plan, because candidly, we are managing to very different values around the Delta. And Supervisor Burgess, I think you really hit this on the head, that it's a big, complex place. And it's important to know that we need different data to manage for salinity conditions in Suisun Marsh. Much of the habitat restoration focus is in the Yolo bypass, Cache Slough, and Lower Casumnas. So we need to better understand the inflow as well as tidal dynamics and how that affects water quality in those places. And in the South Delta, we are increasingly seeing challenges in, as we've discussed previously, in continued loss of channel capacity due to deposition and not actively managing the system. And the reality is, if we are not dredging channels in the South Delta, we see there's extraordinary deposition from the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers, and we are increasingly facing challenges of water level response at times of summer diversion when the projects are ramping up operations. And so there's a balance there that we need to be achieving. And I'm pleased to report that we are making progress. Just this week, the Department of Water Resources has announced that it is prepared to move forward with a memorandum of understanding across local government, state government, and irreplaceably the federal government, the Corps of Engineers in particular, to advance pace and scale of dredging, which has been effectively moribund and stopped since 2009 in the South Delta. And so I'm really pleased to report that we've got this nascent partnership going to bring people to the table and identify specific strategies, pilot projects, and a pathway to funding for bringing dredging back to manage this highly altered system. So we're on track there. Similarly, Metropolitan has been undertaking a significant series of studies and thinking about whether or not the Delta Conveyance project is built. State water project customers retain 85% reliance on through Delta water delivery. So this isn't, so the DCP is not an either or. We have to both maintain the existing configuration, architecture, conditions in the Delta, as well as addressing as a part of a long-term sustainable water supply strategy. And so what Metropolitan is doing is trying to figure out what the cost basis for that. They're anticipating that to develop and maintain levees along a freshwater pathway in the Eastern Delta would represent about a $700 million investment. And if we applied that Delta-wide, it would be roughly a $3 billion investment in levee maintenance and stabilization. And so I think, you know, those investments become super important. We need a long-term strategy to really meet those needs, to address both ecosystem, social, and water supply reliability across the Delta. And so, you know, pleased to see a deepening discussion both across the water contractor community as well as among state agencies to really recognize the needs for a longer-term strategy in thinking about a sustainable Delta. So now I turn to news that is continuing to be of concern. As we've discussed previously, the Bureau of Reclamation elected to contract out its monitoring program, which had been in the purview of the U.S. Geological Survey for the last 30 years. So that transition has resulted in the first interruption of recorded data at the 55 gauging stations around the Delta. I'm pleased to report that DWR is actively monitoring performance of the gauging program across the Delta. But if you go on the U.S. Geological Survey water dashboard website today, what you find is that of the 25 gauges that were in the Bureau's responsibility collectively with USGS, those gray spots on the map there represent locations that are not reporting data. We are informed that the Bureau is now beginning to collect data at those stations, but not reporting that data. In December, the Bureau also elected to contract out its remaining ecological monitoring programs, which had been traditionally done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and other entities. And so, so we're entering uncharted territory with regard to the state-federal partnership in data and who is setting the data standards, who is performing the QA, QC functions that the U.S. Geological Survey had done, and whether or not we are really meeting the standard of best data management practices, integration and accessibility of that data, which is critical as you think about managing the Delta for all of its beneficial uses. And so this slide on the left this is a really good day in the Delta. You can see the salinity zone is lodged in the far western Delta. Water quality conditions reflected in the blue tones are generally good. We've got a little salinity in Cache Slough complex. But overwhelmingly, this is a good day. And so we're happy when we see that data. In mid-September, however, we actually saw an incursion of salinity that left the Franks Tract in a red zone with very high salinity, and it took 4 weeks for that salinity to be addressed in the system. So that, you know, in a very low diversion month, it shows the challenges of keeping the Delta in balance and why we need this integrated gauging network to rely upon for an understanding of freshwater salinity conditions, water quality, that we can all understand and access. And so this is the continuing issue that both the council and the State Water Resources Board and the Department of Water Resources, state water contractors, and federal contractors need to watch very carefully, because in the absence of data, we are moving away from science-based water management. And I think we all just need to kind of hold that concept and really make sure that we are driving to make sure that we have an active federal partner in these areas, and that we recognize the data gaps where they occur, and that the state is in a position to field and focus resources and address public interests in providing data that helps us keep the system in balance. So this is a huge concern, and there's no walking away from it. And I think we need to make sure that we deepen that level of understanding, because if we see a continued dry winter, we are going to see stress in the system this summer in meeting our water quality objectives in a high functioning system, let alone what happens when we see almost half of the gauging and monitoring network offline and the challenges that that can present. I think I want to also put this in the context of the National Academy of Sciences report that was released in November, which in particular focused on 3 actions. How do we better manage the cold water pool to protect salmonid winter run survival below Shasta Dam? There's some interesting recommendations there also about going upstream above the dam on the McCloud River, and there's some encouraging work there to continue to promulgate salmon in the upper watersheds above the dams. There's a recommendation also in the report on specific flow criteria that'll help us achieve multi-species benefits in Old and Middle River operations. But most importantly, I think the report calls out the need for a better integrated state federal science hub to have that information accessible together in one place. And I think we have previously discussed the importance of the interagency ecological program. That program has really been pushed aside as a meaningful forum for science information exchange. And we need to recreate that hub. There's no substitute for an integrated federal state science forum. And so that's another reason that this partnership with the Bureau becomes so important, because it's virtually impossible for the state to dance alone on these matters. So that's what I have to report today. That's really kind of where we are. I think let me also highlight that the state board is convening workshops next week, January 28th through 30th, around the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes program and the updated water quality control plan draft that is before the board this year. And so I think that's an area where we will want to have deep engagement with the council as we think about critical metrics in the plan, as well as the science and monitoring program and the governance underneath the update of the State Water Resources Control Board Water Quality Control Plan in the Bay Delta. So thank you for your time this morning, and happy to address any questions that you may have.
Thank you. That was very enlightening. I had a couple of questions. You had mentioned that there's $700 million investment needed for levees in the freshwater corridor. Is that over a certain amount of time, or is that just like how much in total is needed to fix all the levees?
That is, so that's an estimate over time, and really encompassing about probably about a 15-mile stretch of critical levees, constituting kind of a configured pathway of water moving from the mouth of the Sacramento and the Mokelumne rivers through the Delta and along the eastern side of the Delta down to the pumps. And so so that's just a very focused area. I could go back to that slide. I think it actually highlights critical levies, and I'm happy to send you the metropolitan report as well for further information. Let's see, which slide? 12, yeah. Yep. So what we're really looking at here as you look up from Clifton Court Forebay is Stewart's Tract and other South Delta islands here, and where you move the freshwater in the Delta overwhelmingly is contributed from the Sacramento and the Mokelumne rivers in the summer, and then moves down through Middle River and into the lower Delta. And so it's this corridor in particular that Metropolitan is focused on. And then, but I think that holistically, there are other water quality objectives, other goals to manage tidal and inflow dynamics to protect salinity gradients for the benefit of the habitat restoration work for intertidal zones, for floodplains, that we also need to be paying attention to. And to go, if we went back to, it's a bit of an oversimplification, but overwhelmingly the Bureau is responsible for the monitoring stations in the North and Central Delta, and the Department of Water Resources is driving most of the regulatory compliance stations in the South Delta. So we're getting a picture of the regulatory compliance, but that's a gross oversimplification of the objectives that we're really trying to manage to in the Delta. Because I want to, if we fast forward and we have a dry winter, we are going to be talking about the threats to salinity management and the actions that have been taken to manage that in the Delta. Overwhelmingly, that's West Falls River and the Northwestern Delta, and thinking about where we lose control of the Delta, which will be Frank's Tract. And so, so it's really important that we kind of think holistically about the Delta, because we really are managing to different goals in different places. I mean, overwhelmingly, yes, it's water quality, but it's for different purposes and different functionality in those places, and we really need to be able to track that. But thank you for that question.
My second question was about the data that's currently offline. So yeah, that's super concerning. Are they saying it's temporary offline and they're just trying to get it back on?
Yes.
Can you kind of tell us, like, is that
Yeah.
just, they're never gonna?
Well, I think we want to certainly, I see Todd over our shoulder here. He can probably give you a better answer, but I think we are hearing the target to bring the data online was January. They are, I know, endeavoring to bring the data back online. I think one of the things that we also need to recognize is it's not one or two of these stations, but this network of monitoring stations has a 30-plus year history. A 30-plus year history of delivering continuous data that informs all of the models that we use to predictively manage for state and federal project operations, as well as the salinity gradient in the Delta overall. And so to lose the integration of that data and the QA/QC methodologies underneath it is very disconcerting. It's, we need to have that understanding together, that we are actually managing to the same goals, that we're using the same data, that we have the same data, that we're applying the same data standards in the data that we're looking at to manage the system. And so, so I think we're hopeful of seeing that data come back online soon, and fingers crossed. But I think that we all have an obligation to actively reach out and make sure that this new methodology of bringing monitoring to place by contracting out rather than the utilization of the kind of government to government state federal partnership in the data, that we find a way to bridge that gap, because I think there's no shortcut in data standards or harmonization and accessibility and actually being able to QA and QC that data together. So I think this is just an issue that is both the council and the state board have a continuing obligation to actively monitor.
I agree. And what comes to my mind is I'd like to talk to the council members about us potentially writing some type of a letter and that the council has endorsed to really advocate for getting this data back online, advocate for not contracting it out. So maybe if everybody thinks that's a good idea, could we maybe have a little conversation about that and then direct JP to work with staff on drafting something that we could approve here at the council? Yes. You like that? Gail, you're good with that? Yeah. Okay. Anne?
Yeah, and I think maybe also addressing the duration of the contract. So obviously the concern about not having it be a government to government, but then sort of the disruption involved with such a short period of time.
Right,
Yeah, the
right.
1 year
Because
seems
that's a
like it.
great point. It's a 1 year contract too. And so I think a lot of what we're looking at in this transition is a little mind-boggling to think of how you actually bring the system back together in a 1 year contract framework. So I think that's a whole nother set of questions. And what I actually like about the council's approach here is that I think that helps us transition for an active role for the Delta Science Program in monitoring the update of the water quality control plan objectives as well. So I think that helps us begin to get integrated early in building out the science program's role in thinking about the updated water quality control plan.
And can I ask a question about who is the appropriate recipient of such a letter?
Is it the Bureau?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Bureau.
And Daniel, I can't see you, so do you concur we should write a letter?
I do. Thanks, Julie.
Okay. All right. And so we'll do that. We'll ask JP to take that up. And then Diane, you had some more questions for the Watermaster.
So first of all, just an observation, your previous experience with the Nature Conservancy, working with the big folks like Metropolitan, but understanding on the ground cost savings, I think has really created a really unique and great contribution that you can provide. So I just appreciate what you bring to this job. On page 13, you have the picture of the grayed out dots, which are the stations that remain offline. And next to that picture, you have a snapshot of the salinity on January 15th, which looks great.
Mm-hmm.
So what percentage, I was trying to count all the dots, but some of them are overlapped. What percentage are grayed out at this point? It looks like it's about 30, 40, 50% at least.
Close to 50. I'm just running. So 20 of 54. So that's
20 are
10,
out.
27.
So that's 40%.
So that's rough. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if and you were talking about a September salinity issue. If these grayed out dots remained grayed out today and that salinity issue happened, would we be able to see it?
We would.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And what is in it for the Bureau of Reclamation to keep this data? Is it useful to them?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think all Californians rely, I mean, the dual goals of the Delta Reform Act are water supply reliability and ecosystem restoration hand in hand. And so the only way we can achieve those goals, which are, as you all are aware, extraordinarily difficult to meet, the only way we can begin to say that we have a commitment and a science-driven program to meet those objectives is to have the data. And additionally, There's nothing the Bureau or the state project want more than to be exporting low salinity water. And so the data overall is critical. And especially I would underscore, we need the data less in the winter than we do in the summer. And that's also the period when we're seeing pump operations increase to meet demands of the state and federal customer needs in the system. And so what we also need to understand is the dynamics of this overwhelmingly tidal dominated delta system with less inflow in the summer has more important and more fragile trigger points in how we manage that salinity and what the strategy is to manage that salinity, especially in places like the Cache Slough complex, where I have begun to talk to both agricultural and municipal diverters about whether we actually need a diversion schedule to ensure that they're getting clean water in a way that isn't impairing conditions for the habitat objectives in the slough. So we need to we got to have the data to make that kind of a trade-off in particular. And we need the data to ensure that the customers' needs of the state and federal projects are met with high quality, low salinity water being provided to the projects. So there's a complete interdependence here.
So the reason why I asked that question is to put that out for everybody to know, because, we're coming from one angle, but I think the tone of our letter should acknowledge the importance to them, because it is a partnership and it is mutually benefiting. And so we need to make sure that the tone of our letter isn't just from this angle, but from, I keep doing that to you guys. I'm really sorry. But that we are, that there's a good reason. And then I also wanted to acknowledge that when we talk about water quality, it's not about all the flow that's coming down either. We're talking about the quality of the water and how it affects, and you address that. And so I think that's important. And the last part of it is, California has a history of fighting over water. And one of the things that has helped bring people together is bringing the Independent Science Board, bringing the science in that we all agree on. And when that data is manipulated or held back or isn't as reliable, that makes it harder for us to do our jobs. And it also impacts trust. And we need to be able to trust. And so I would, also add that to our letters that, we all need to work together, and this data is very important so that we can trust and do what we need to do to work together. Thank you.
It's the data that isn't that is offline. Is the Bureau able to see it from this third-party contractor, and they're just not making it available to everyone else?
I can't answer that question. I don't know. I think, look, there's real value in ensuring that the Bureau is QA/QCing their monitoring equipment and in assimilation of that data before it's public. And I hope that they're coordinating closely with the Department of Water Resources. And we've begun a kind of regular check-in process with the Department of Water Resources on their QA/QC methodology to ensure it's aligned with objectives that the state board has established. And I think of note, the update in the water quality control plan, Appendix A, actually has a very prescriptive schedule of exactly what data we're looking for from specific monitoring stations. So I think that's helpful as a benchmark, but I would also underscore that those are objectives for specific regulatory purposes with one additional objective of providing better data to track harmful algal blooms and cyanotoxins in the system. So that's an additional data layer that is important, and where these meters are just literally added on. And I want to underscore that the U.S. Geological Survey remains an active contract party with both the State Water Board and the Department of Water Resources, even as those contracts have been canceled with the Bureau of Reclamation. So there are other monitoring activities that USGS remains actively engaged in the Delta, and but they did play the critical role of really harmonizing both the state and federal data sets for consistent QA/QC methodology. And as we sit here today, we don't know who's going to do that. We're anticipating that the Department of Water Resources will establish that with the Bureau, but I think everyone's kind of taking a deep breath in the moment in hopes that the Bureau's data comes back online quickly, and that we kind of reintegrate those data partnerships just at a fundamental level.
Yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying question? You mentioned the harmful algal blooms. That is separate monitoring that is still going on, or is that also impacted by these?
It's
stations?
separate monitoring that the board has contracted with USGS to do.
Sorry.
No, I think I'm hearing him say it's not impacted. So
Not impacted
yeah.
at this juncture, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I would just underscore a council member Vargas's comment that like making it tangible,
Yeah.
and as kind of plain language as possible, the implications long term for water deliveries, water quality to water users, as well as the kind of in Delta, needs for this would be helpful, I think, given the audience.
Yeah, the state, I should also note, Department of Water Resources has active contracts with USGS on the harmful algal blooms issue, which have been a growing concern even in Clifton Court Forebay and throughout the Southern Delta. Fortunately, we've had few good water years in a row. But if we go back to 2022, we were seeing substantial incidents of harmful algal blooms throughout the Southern Delta in particular.
JP?
Yeah, so if I could just ask for your permission to perhaps work with the chair, since our next meeting is going to be a hearing, and I don't know that we'll be able to review and discuss the letter then. Since it is a timely issue, I'd recommend that maybe I could work with you or a subset of the board so we could get the letter
Is everybody
sent
good with
before
that?
then.
Yes, for timeliness. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
great.
Thank you
Thank you.
for bringing that up. Yes, very important upcoming meeting. Packed agenda. Do we need a motion for it? Okay. Okay.
We're fine with just the direction you've provided for this to be chair and JP. And if the council wanted to come back at that point, they could go.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for asking that, Gail. Good question. All right. Are there any other questions for Jay from our members? No, thank you. That was great. Do we have any public comment?
No public comment online or in Sacramento. Councilmember Zingali.
That was great, Jay. Thank you. No public comment here.
All right. With that, we'll talk a little bit about the preparation for our next council meeting, which, as we mentioned, is going to be Thursday, February 26th and Friday, February 27th here at the CNRA building. So please refer to the posted meeting notes for further information or updates. And if you are planning on attending that meeting, please take careful note of the times that the buildings are going to be open. We're going to be putting out some information about public comment and other things because we realize this is going to have a lot of public interest. We want to make sure it goes smoothly, that everyone has as much time as possible to participate in our process, but also we do have some state rules about the building and other things, and we just want to make sure that that goes really smoothly. So please do follow our notices and take a look at what we're going to put out online about that. And with that, our first meeting of 2026 is concluded. Thank you very much.